Okay, we are recording. This is the Kubernetes SIG architecture production readiness review team meeting for Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. So thank you all. Let me share the agenda. Sorry, I don't remember how to share things in Zoom. It's not showing. I don't see there it is, the big green button. All right. Sorry, you couldn't hear me. Zoom always does that when I share. I'm sure there's some setting I can fix. So thank you. Just wanted to welcome our shadows. We have a great, good crew of shadows, which is great. We've been doing PRR now for several releases, and the team kind of started with 3, went to 4, and then went back to 3, and then at least for this cycle, Wojciech is out until the end of the year. So it was just David and me. So really, really grateful to have all of you here. Happy to, maybe you want to introduce yourselves. I know all of you. I don't know if David knows all of you or you all know each other, in which case.
I also think I know everybody. So.
Yeah. Okay, well.
Good to see you guys.
If you have anything you want to say about why you want to do PRR, chime in. Otherwise, we'll move on to David's agenda. Welcome, all of you. All right, I'll take that as a no. So it's all you, Mr. Eads.
Let's try that without being on mute. All right, so you guys are all fairly new here and probably wondering why on earth would we bother to do this. Every year for the past 3 years, we have run a survey of whoever wanted to answer, but we get demographic data, and was largely people who administer Cube or run it as a platform as a service. And I'm trying to find the share button. John, it tells me the host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you?
Yeah. All right.
They all look trustworthy to me.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Well, I don't know exactly how to do that, but I can make you a co-host.
Okay, that'll work. All right, and okay, let me close this window just in case I get that wrong. And you guys should be seeing 2 survey results, left and a right. Do you
Yes.
see a little report? Excellent. So on the left is the one we did this year. On the right is the one that we did last year. You can see right away we got a lot less participation this time. Not sure why, but we have about 2/3 of the results of last year. Overall, the breakdown to my quick eyeball of the sorts of people that responded looked about the same. You ended up with about 80% of people who are either cluster admins or run it as a platform as a service. We added a new question this year, and the question we added was, is Cube more reliable than a year ago? And I was very satisfied with his answers. 75% said yes. There were a bunch of people who didn't answer or went not sure, about 20%, and only 3% said that we were not more reliable than last year. And so one possible claim out of this is that PRR is useful to do to help improve this, or to help keep cube reliable. That's the glass like half full way to look at it. The other way to look at it is just we're a more mature product. But I think if you look at the number of enhancements actually merging, I think that the focus on how do I actually administer the thing that I'm creating has been valuable. Overall, the demographics continue to be really close. There's not as many people who administer very small sets of nodes. But overall, our sweet spot is still in the 10 to 1,000 nodes, 10 to 1,000 clusters. The reason why we drew that line in the first place was that we figured people who are at the very large numbers of clusters and very large numbers of nodes, they already paid specialized people to run Cube. They were very familiar with it. They appreciated our help, but they didn't really need it in the same way. The chart for clusters versus nodes under management, it's shifting slightly. You can see it most in the, I don't know if you can see where my pointer's going. Hopefully you can. But
you can see the pointer.
Excellent. So I noticed that this column had shifted, and it said to me, we are running fewer small clusters. As I recall reading it, I wrote down my notes that way. So we have more nodes for smaller numbers of clusters, which I think is fairly good. The version breakdown is significantly different this release. This is the raw version numbers. If you recall, John, last time we did this, we said, gee, I wish we had a thing that showed us version level minus however many versions back you were.
Yes.
So do you want to try that chart this time? That's what this page is. Yeah. This is 124. It's the most current release when we released the survey. And it is 124 minus 3 releases. And then you can compare it against 121, which was last year, the newest release, minus 2 releases in this case. And you can see we have a big difference. There are a lot of clusters lingering on 121.
Well, we had a bunch of removals in 122, right?
We do. That's certainly what was going through my head. I have not had the heart to look up to see whether 121 is out of support. But my memory is that 121 went out of support when we shipped 125. I don't know. I bet Jeremy probably knows.
Well, yeah, I see him nodding. This survey was done Q2, right? So, you know, we are, I guess that's not that long ago, is it?
It is not. We shipped 125, what, a month and change ago?
Yeah.
So it'd be a lot to try to move in that time frame. So that definitely stood out to me when I was going through and looking at this, and I was,
we don't know what actionable we can take other than the awareness that removals are so painful.
I don't have much out of that. I looked at it and this chart made it really clear. I do think that's gotten better, right? As a result, the beta policies of not allowing perma-beta and disabling beta APIs by default both came out of the results of the survey year 1 and year 2. And so I'm hopeful that will ease future migrations because there will not be a guaranteed cliff that every feature goes through or that users of every feature go through. So that's my takeaway from the top part of this chart is that we are stuck here on the oldest versions. The newest versions show a little bit of shuffling. I think it's more noteworthy to me that if you add up n-1, n-2, n-3, we have a larger portion of it taken up by those releases versus the ones that are even older. So
yeah, I see
people,
that. So, like,
and they're,
yeah,
yeah,
if you look at the, it's almost everybody is on n minus 1, 2, or 3. And 124 had just come out, I think, when this survey was done. So we wouldn't really expect many people on 124.
yeah, but this portion of the chart is actually pretty small. So people are staying current with their newest clusters. And when you start breaking it down by how many clusters you have, it's the same as we've seen every year. If you have a lot of clusters, you have all the versions. You have things that are really old, and then you have things that are really new. You just get enough clusters, that's what happens. So this chart surprised me. It surprised me because people had answered that they thought Cube was more stable than it was before a year ago. But we actually had a fair number, a slight increase in the percentage of clusters that had rolled back minor releases in production. Not huge. Overall, it's very similar to the previous year, but it is a slight uptick. But the reasons it failed were, I think, slightly better. We did not have as many cluster failures. Now, users get to self-select. I realize that the shadows here did not see the survey questions, but users get to select if you rolled back. There's a time frame. If you rolled back, I think in the past year, did you roll back for these reasons? Check the ones that apply, and they get to select: was it a bad feature? Was it a bad component? Did my entire cluster fail? Was I just testing, or was it a scalability problem? And in previous years, and including last year, one of the reasons that people checked was because my cluster failed. And they get to decide, right? Was it a feature? Was it a component? Was it a cluster? They probably don't know exactly what each of those is. But this release, we didn't see people choosing cluster failed. It was odd enough that I actually feel a need to go back and look at the data to see if I have parsed it incorrectly. But since I finished building the first cut of all these graphs yesterday, I haven't gone back to double check to see if we changed some kind of phrasing somewhere and broke it. But that could at least explain the result. So does the next page. So the next page is about, did you roll back a patch version? And this year, so few people in absolute numbers rolled back patch versions. I don't even know if this page is useful, right? And for comparison, last year we had double the numbers and only a third more people answer it. So they might be looking at this and saying, that's a lot better.
Right. I've had to roll back way fewer patch versions, and maybe a few people had to roll back a minor version. Maybe they had to roll back because of the removals that they weren't aware of.
It could be. I can imagine someone going, "Oh, what just happened? What just happened?" Exactly. as they upgrade and CRD application starts failing.
It's not that much better though, because there was less respondents, right? So proportionally speaking, we should expect less.
A third fewer.
Yeah. So we should expect at least a third fewer if things are staying constant.
Yeah, and I think we got about a half fewer.
Okay, so it's better, but it's not like half better. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, okay. It's the numbers are small, so it almost becomes annoying.
Yeah. So like I built this chart and I kept it in here so that we can keep it for future times. I did, by the way, John, I did write up a list of, like, in order to build this report, I do this, because it is definitely your turn next time.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a fair bit of work, isn't it?
It is, and I've done my 2 years. So
Okay.
um,
Well, we
this
have a
one.
whole bunch of new participants, so
Oh, I see. Yeah, they're going to be excited. They're going to be like, "I've done all this, and the next thing I want to do, I want to review the survey results." It is very neat to get to see an evolution over time. We finally got there, right? 3 years. It's pretty good. This chart I took away from it, we were just about the same as before. Beta and GA policies, they've been persistently all on. Matches our defaults. I don't see a whole lot of that changing. I don't know if I could look at this and say it would be a good idea for us to start disabling beta features. I don't know that I could read this chart.
I don't remember the wording. Like, is this beta APIs or beta features? It must be beta features.
It's beta features.
Okay.
And
we have disabled the beta APIs, but
correct. And the reason they were distinct is because the beta features do not have a forced client migration in them. Right. So, this to my eye looked about the same as before. And again, it's fairly small numbers when you look at this total number of respondents and then the number who actually disabled it, trying to glean why you disabled it from like 8 people is small. Alpha enablement. This one surprised me for how big a difference it was in terms of the number of people who chose to turn on, the percent of people who chose to turn on alpha features in production was very small compared to previous years. Yep. That does feel like progress to me. And I don't know whether you want to really dig into each of the individual categories, but just overall, this looked to me like we saw a significant reduction and across all categories. And I would just go ahead and take it as
I mean, we still see the same roughly 40%, or well, 40 versus 50% roughly for development environments. So people hopefully are still trying them, trying alpha features, but not enabling them in production.
I guess glass half empty kind of guy could look at that and say the alpha features are so bad, no one has the guts to turn them on in production anymore. But I am definitely a glass half full guy. So I'm going to go with, we have finally cleared enough features out of alpha that people are able to run their clusters without needing plus this one more thing that's an alpha that I haven't gotten finished yet.
Yeah.
The results for how people end up troubleshooting various problems. I think in one of these the colors shifted, and so it became a little harder to see. Did I get the colors fixed? I might have gotten the colors fixed. So this is a breakdown of the people who answer a question that says, have you used metrics to debug a problem in the past month, quarter, year, or never? And then people pick one from a couple of different categories. We ask them for events, we ask them for metrics, and we ask them for logs. And consistently, as you would expect, the fewer clusters you have, the more likely you are to use something like, or I guess this is nodes. Those are clusters is the next page. The more likely you are to use something like metrics if you're big, and logs if you're small, and events if you're somewhere in between. But at the lower end of the scale, we did seem to see higher percentages of people actually using metrics, which I took to be a good thing. You can see here. What is that?
Our metrics are getting better, right? Like,
yeah. I think so. We've been focusing on it in the PRR reviews.
Yeah.
I think it stands out more on the next page when you look at it by cluster, if I recall. Nope, that was not. So it's similar to what we've had in the past. No huge difference by cluster. I think by node I did see the little improvement, but it does show us that metrics are by far for this category, they are very valuable, and we should continue our focus on them. And that is all I've got. Any questions? I can click through to any page here. The survey results, as before, we have, there's the last question with email addresses, so I don't want to project that. I should make a data set that removes those. So, I shouldn't. Anyway, there are a couple of free-form text fields. There are some fields about what other debugging tools you use. And I've been meaning to slice the what other tools do you use to debug your cluster, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, we used to do. There was a question about like what you're
Yeah,
using.
and there still is. It lists cloud provider, log tools, Splunk, Prometheus, Elasticsearch, Datadog, maybe. So.
All right. So yeah, I think that we may want to present a summary of this to the SIG Arch meeting. I don't know if you can do it tomorrow, but I don't know what's on the agenda tomorrow there. Probably nothing. So if you are up for that, we can present. I don't know if we want to do the whole thing, but if there's highlights you want to present and then share the two reports, that would probably be useful.
Yeah, I can go ahead and pick out, if I were picking out highlights for a 5 to 10 minute 5-minute description, 5-minute questions, I would probably choose this one. We are more reliable, and this one we are stuck on 121.
Right.
I think those are the two biggest things.
Okay, I'll add that to the agenda for tomorrow then.
Okay. Now, you've got a lot of people here, and they've sat through me talking for like 20 minutes. So, John, I believe you owe them an explanation of what is going to happen in the next 2 weeks.
Yes. Okay. So there's a new process this cycle, so it's new to us as well. Let me share that project board. 1 second, find it. Oh, I can't remember where it is. All right, should be easier than this, but it's new for me too.
Is that the link in the chat?
Did somebody put it in the chat? All right. Here we go. Share. No.
While John's doing that, one thing I was thinking about, David, when you were talking about this is we're going to have beta APIs turned off by default in the future. Is there anything in the data already to support that, or anything that we should be doing in the future to gather data, since we're going to be doing that and we might want to showcase the effect?
So one of the reasons that the primary reason that we did it was because of difficulty during upgrade and freeform comments about, like, you pulled my APIs. And So I think the way we would see that manifest is that we don't see as many version cliffs. So in that presentation I just gave, it said people are stuck on 121, and it's noteworthy. Like, it was a big difference between where we were when we did this in 121 and the previous level was 118. I think us not seeing that in the future, in the survey for 2023, will be a good check.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. That's a good thing to watch.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so I was actually talking, but again, when I share, Zoom mutes me. Yes. So so you've probably all seen the new sheet that's being used for enhancements tracking. This replaces, or the new project board, which replaces the sheet that we used to use. And we have a PRR tab on there. So in the PRR tab, there's an assignee and there's a shadow, and everybody here except for Han will be in that list. So I will add Han to the list too. In fact, I can just add him right here. So there we go. So what we would ask you to do is, as you, what we'll be doing is going through and assigning ourselves, and you can just look over the caps and decide. I don't know, we can decide how to do this. I was thinking people would just self-select, but I would be happy to get together with people who are like shadowing some of mine. Well, as I go and do PRR reviews, we can maybe do a live meeting and just go through it. It's pretty, I guess I talked with some of you, but not with everybody. So in my mind, the most important thing about the PRR review is actually simply getting the developers to shift their mindset and think through the problems that might happen from their feature. Like, a lot of the questions we ask aren't, they're really just geared around forcing people to think through things that they might not otherwise think about. Developers, with all good intentions, tend to be most interested in the happy path, tend to be most interested in getting their functionality working. And so we try to ask about, and they may be thinking about in isolation how their feature works. And we try to ask about, okay, at alpha, the main thing we ask about is, can we turn this thing off without breaking the cluster? And when we turn it back on, will it still work and not break the cluster? So that's almost all we ask at alpha, very, very minimal. And then the sort of requirements ramp up. So I didn't like prepare a going through the questionnaire. Maybe I should have. We could probably do that still. But, you know, I guess as you shadow, we have two ways we can do this. I'd love to get people's thoughts, right? One is we can sit together and do a review. Another is you can look at reviews we've done in the past, and you can sort of do a review yourself and then decide whether, and then we would review the review. I don't know, anybody have thoughts about how we would want to approach it? No? What would be most useful to people as far as, would it be sitting down with whoever the approver is, which is going to be mostly me and David this cycle, because I don't think Wojciech's going to participate. Would it be useful to sit side by side with us as we go through and do it and we talk about it?
For me, selfishly, yeah, sitting side by side would probably help. If people are kind of time constrained and need to do things async, I would also be happy to be on ones where the primary reviewer needs to do work async. But obviously, for me, being able to actually sit in would be amazing.
You're in Eastern time, right?
I am, yes.
Anyone else in Eastern time? Okay, well, I was initially going to suggest we'll split it up Eastern time and West Coast time, and that'd be perfect. I mean, it might still be perfect for me.
I wake up super early, so I'm basically Eastern time.
Okay, so we have Andrew says he's Eastern time too.
Okay.
I'm in Mountain, but I start pretty early as well because we have some folks in Eastern time, so we can do both.
So if I get Joe and Han and Andrew, and they are interested in doing that, I'm willing to do that because I'm going to spend the same amount of time, sort of regardless. I will forewarn you that I do spend a fair amount of my time when I'm reviewing these actually going through and reading the KEP, because a lot of times it's something new for me. And so, like, if you're expecting an amazing presentation like I just gave and that you were all enthralled by, this will be even less interesting for at least part of it, because a lot of it is especially when you go to beta, the questions become things like, if this starts failing in my cluster, how will I know as a cluster admin this is failing? How would I know as a user that this is failing so that I could complain to my cluster admin? And then what as a cluster admin should I try to do to either fix it or gather the data for the person who's going to fix it? And that takes a fair amount of time reading the KEP to understand what it's doing.
Yes.
But I am happy to do that, and I'm going to be looking to start doing this next week. I'm probably not going to start tomorrow or the day after. It'll be next week.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. So a lot of this is actually, familiarizing yourself with the KEP, which sitting and doing it live with somebody isn't probably all that interesting, but we could try it and see how it goes. When I read them, like when I read the KEPs through, sometimes it can become a almost overall design review because it's hard not to, but there's also time constraints. So last cycle, I think, what were there, David, 80 KEPs, and so oh, somebody's alarm's going off, and so at some point, like, there's a judgment call as to how much time and how much depth to go into the design pieces, but often the design pieces dictate things, especially around scalability or things like that. So, so I guess maybe the first step, I also will probably start next week, and to give a time frame. So we have what we call soft freeze for PRR, the 29th. What that is saying is, hey, please try to get your things ready for PRR to give us time to review them before the cutoff. But we make a best effort to get everybody's PRR done, and thus far have, I believe, gotten everybody's done and not dropped anybody because of the soft deadline. But it's just kind of to create a little extra urgency for people to try and make our lives easier and not too crammed in the last week. But what tends to happen is that last week gets pretty hectic. And it's a poll and wait cycle. You go through all your assigned KEPs and you make your comments, and then you wait. And so, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with in general in PR reviews, pretty common, but that's, so I tend to I'm hoping to keep everything in the enhancements tab thing, project board. So we had them add this notes column, you'll see. So in the past, what I've done is I've had just a spreadsheet where I have all of them listed, and I have a notes column that says when I last pulled that one and what the current status is effectively, like what I'm waiting on typically. And so that way it makes it easy. I can just go through my list, and as I check each one, I just take a note and move on. So that's, I'm hoping I can do all of that through that enhancements project board now, rather than having a separate spreadsheet for it. But what we can do this week, I guess, is all of us should go through and assign ourselves to, David and I assign ourselves to the PRR assignee, and each of you assign yourselves to some of the shadow some of those, and then we can, once we have that, we can organize some calls to go over the thing.
That sounds good. I will go ahead and help split before the end of this week.
FYI, I'm not sure how much Wojciech is going to be involved, but he volunteered himself to be my PR reviewer for my caps. So he is doing some stuff, I think.
It's just out of the goodness of his heart, because I think he's on sabbatical.
Yeah.
That's just how much he likes you, huh?
Exactly.
I think he's interested in the subject matter.
I think
CSI storage migration. Are you sure you got the right one?
No, he volunteered for several of them, and I think that was not
okay.
mine. That was not mine. Yeah.
He did say something on Slack that he was going to go through. I mean, so
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be awesome. I don't want him to do stuff when he's supposed to be not doing stuff, but definitely there's enough work. But I'm very encouraged having all of you here to help out. Obviously, this cycle, I expect it to, be more. There'll be help, but it'll be just also, learning. So, but hopefully in the future cycle, this will ease the burden a lot. Do you want to go through the questionnaire now and see what we currently do? Just we can sort of talk about each of the questions since we have time, and how we interpret them. Let me find it.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Okay, let me share this tab, and then it will silence me again for whatever reason. Okay, so this is the enhancements repo. Everything's done in the enhancements repo, as you know, probably know. Caps, and then there's the cap template, and in the cap template we have our questionnaire. I'm going to actually go to the raw because because there used to be like a raw thing here. What did they do to me? Am I an idiot here, guys? What's happening? There was always a way to see the raw content. Was there not?
Click on it. Not click the file.
Go to file.
Yeah.
You have to go to file. Yeah.
Okay, I can't do it from the directory. Got it. Okay. All right, so we have comments in here. That's why. Okay, here we go. This is way too small, probably, right?
It's fine for me.
If you're my age, too small.
It's too small.
Okay. All right. So when people are, obviously you're reviewing the KEP in Markdown, so you'll see all the comments. Each section talks about when it needs to be completed, and then the comments try to give some context around what the point of the question is. Mechanically, we handle the approvals by having a separate directory that has the prod readiness approvers in the owner's file. It's a little awkward, but it works well enough. Okay, so partly this serves not just as, like I said in the beginning, like we want to make people think, but we also want to document. So partly we're this puts into the KEP documentation. Okay, here's how you enable or disable it, and there's a feature gate to do that. We keep this in the KEP.yaml. The theory was at the time that we can do some tooling around it. None of that's happened, but we're not changing the process now at this point. Maybe we'll eventually get that tooling. So people, in here, they need to document whether there's a feature gate for it, which almost always there should be. And then the specific components that use that feature gate. Sometimes we get KEP reviews for things that are out of tree, so they won't have a feature gate. It'll just be like, don't deploy it. That would be like the other type of thing. We don't technically need to review things that are out of tree, but if people want them reviewed, we're happy to do so. And anybody, I can't see hands raised or anything while I'm looking at this, so if anybody has any questions, just blurt them out, please. We don't want to change any default behavior if we can avoid it. Okay, so can it be disabled once it's been enabled? So that this is how do you do the actual rollback? Disabled supported should always really be true. We should almost never, this should almost always be true, right? But sometimes there are consequences on, that fall out of the disablement, and we want to make sure that we document them here. And this next question is like, okay, you've disabled it and then you re-enable it. And sometimes people don't think, like I remember looking at the IPv6 PRR review. There were these situations where if you were like enabling and disabling, you could essentially trigger a massive flood of resources being created of endpoints being created from your services, because effectively they didn't create them for the IPv6 endpoint until you enabled it. And then if you've got 10,000 endpoints in your service, it could cause a flood. So we didn't really tell them to do anything about that other than, to document it and make it really clear so that users who are using this are aware of the impact of their actions. And then our E2E framework is not great about enabling and disabling feature gates. So the best we get is unit tests for the most part for the enablement and disablement pieces. With API fields, we do want to see tests around, how things are handled. And we try to provide PR links or whatever where it can be helpful to people. I think we're still in the alpha section here. Feature enablement, that's 3 hashes. Okay, so here we get finally to beta. So here we're starting to talk about, okay, how do we roll out this feature? Often these features have both an API server and say a kubelet component. And so we want to make sure people have thought through, how does it work when nodes are, when there's a partially rolled out provisioning of the feature, enablement of the feature. How do the nodes which have yet to be updated, respond? What if you can see the examples here? Your API server restarts in the middle of this. Do the nodes get confused, or is everything fine? Obviously, we want everything to be fine. And then we start to get into metrics. How do we know that as we're rolling out this feature enablement, or the feature if on upgrade, especially now that beta features are disabled, by default. I guess an upgrade is not as much of an issue, except when they're going to GA. But in any case, you know, how do you roll back? How do you know when you need to roll back? How do you know it's failing? Upgrade, downgrade,
So
upgrade.
can I comment on that real quick?
Comment as much as you want.
Yeah, so one of the harder parts that we found is that when features that exist or run on a per node basis on the host make it to beta, it can be difficult to for developers to see how they would debug that at scale. And an example that we used to get quite often was, well, you SSH into the host, and then you run these commands to look at the proc file system, and you figure out what's broken there, and you go into the journals and you can fix the problem. And that doesn't work well at scale when you are trying to decide whether you need to roll a thing back. And that's where the question about metrics comes in. And I think there's more questions as John gets to later sections. And pressing back on that is important, because even if they only update reference implementation, maybe they only update whatever standard fleecer there is to expose the data, it can make a big difference when you actually roll out a feature.
Yeah, some of that comes up in later questions, like around the monitoring, I think in the next section. Like, it's very common to get the answer, like David said, of SSHing in. It's also very common, that's at a node level, but even at a cluster level, it's very common to get the answer of run this kube control command. And if you've got 10,000 clusters or 100,000 clusters, we don't, not many people have 100,000, but even if you've got 1,000 clusters, that's not a really very easy way to determine whether the feature's enabled, for example. That's often one of them. Like, is it in use, right? In use and enabled are different things. But like, we'd like to see metrics for those things because we don't want people to have to run commands against thousands of clusters. So that's very common feedback we have in the PRR reviews.
Do we have a generic feature enabled metric?
We, in a meeting about a month ago, so Mo Khan, I think it was it Mo? Is that who it was?
I think so.
Was going to propose a cap for that. I haven't seen whether he has or not.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Yes.
I would be in favor of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know if that's happened, but it was a discussion we had in our meeting a month or so ago, and we all agreed that would be a good thing. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, upgrade and rollback tested, upgrade, downgrade, upgrade. This is similar to enable, disable, enable. Like, those are multi-stage sequences of events that people don't always think through. And if you leave detritus, you know, after downgrade, you leave crap around, then when you upgrade again, you know, it might cause confusion. So you just got to make sure that those things are tested. Typically, that's going to be manually tested because we don't have anything to do. We don't have any EDE framework that can handle that kind of thing. And then we just call out, especially, you know, are you changing any interfaces? That it's gonna surprise people. All right, monitoring requirements. As I said, how can we tell if it's in use by workloads? Now, some of these questions apply to certain types of features and not other types of features. So that'll often come up. So you'll get, this doesn't apply to my feature, and I mean, you have to make a judgment call about that, whether it's true or not. But this is like, just because I've enabled, you know, network policy, it doesn't mean that anybody's using network policy. So we have to have a way to tell whether somebody's using it. This is where I often get run this kube control command. And I think, David, didn't we have a discussion at one point of like, do we have metrics around like counts of individual resources or anything like that? I mean, I think there's always, you know,
We decided that we did not need to create a metric for every field, basically. Like if you add a new field to figure out whether someone's using it, we decided against doing that.
Yeah, the cardinality would be super high, I think.
Yeah, that's
It would start out small and then ramp up. Is what we figured would happen. So determining whether a feature is enabled, some metric for that would be very useful, and that will let you know whether someone might be using it.
Well, there's also whether a given resource kind, group and kind exist, right? Like I know that we do that for, like, I know we have metrics for when people, for example, use a deprecated API or whatever, right? So do we have something that just gives us demographics on, and would the cardinality be too high is a question. I don't recall the answer. So.
For the majority of features that I've seen coming through, they end up adding things like error counts and success counts overall. So you add something for storage, they have an error count, a latency, and a success count. So the cardinality is fairly small, but if they look and see that any of those are greater than 0, someone's using it.
Yeah, okay.
A question here. Are we looking for like a command that you can use with vanilla Kubernetes, or if somebody came and said, hey, you can use kube state metrics and it would give you this, is that acceptable? Because you would have to then like put that extension on your cluster.
I have historically allowed, you have to use kube state metrics, you have to use C advisor or this fleecer. The idea of like, you put this thing on the host, I've taken the trouble of providing at least one for you. If yours doesn't do it, then it's on you to fix it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've been okay with the kube state metrics as well. Yeah. All right. How do you know it's working for your instance? So this is more user oriented as opposed to operator fleet oriented. But we added this at one point because we felt from a documentation standpoint, it's super useful. So this is more like looking at a specific cluster. You look at the events or the status. So this is one where you're not thinking in that global scale. So as a operator operating this, I don't know enough about your feature to know whether it's working well or not, what metrics, how I should, what's a reasonable SLO for your metrics. So please tell me. That's all this section is. What are my SLIs? What are my SLOs that I should be able to say this feature is healthy? Sometimes there's a reason not to add a metric, but we try to document it here. Sorry, I guess I'm not reading the questions. Maybe I should be. Okay, dependencies. So this is where we start to talk about like other things within the cluster that this might rely upon. So are there any specific services running in the cluster that are necessary in order for this feature to work? Things like, metric servers or node agents. And the idea here is to document, this is sort of more of a playbook or section of the, so again, more for documentation than for review, but it's like, what happens if API server goes down? And if your feature is something running on the node, what happens when API server goes down? Or if it's something, running as a service within the cluster and it depends upon some other service within the cluster, how do we figure out what's happening? Scalability questions. So here we're trying to get at what sort of is the impact of your change based upon the number of resources you create, the number of reads or writes to those resources, and make sure that we're not causing a scalability issue. So new API types, and we talk about how big those are, number for each cluster, additional API calls. typically things like a certain, like a service controller is going to create load balancers or whatever in the cloud provider. So there may be scalability issues there. Here we go, size or count, I guess we had it there. And then what is the impact on other SLIs and SLOs? So if you're adding some feature that, you know, that adds a 20-minute sleep in kubelet startup, we would want to know about that. We are almost out of time. So there's nothing to, I don't know, none of these seem surprising to me. I think they're pretty straightforward. Then again, we get into this runbook section, troubleshooting. How do you, how does this, we already asked about failures, but we want to make sure people specifically think about this, other known failure modes, and that's it. Like, so really, like I said, the idea is make people document and think through the failure scenarios, make people document and think through as a operator with thousands of clusters. I have a very different vantage point than an operator on a single cluster. And I want to make sure that I can, both types of people can support the feature.
And answers have been getting a lot better over time. People have gotten used to answering it. So things have gotten significantly easier. One final note, John, I have gone through and everything that was graduating or that already had one of us assigned, either you or I, I've gone ahead and added it to the assignee column.
Awesome.
And there's a bunch of net new stuff we're going to have to split up. So
fantastic. Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Reach out on the channel if you have any questions. We'll get these further future assignments done. Also go through and based on time zones or not, pick ones you're interested in, and we'll try and set up some live calls next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you.